For over 60 years, the world of James Bond has been filled with striking visual motifs and metaphors concealed within elaborate set designs. It is a world where glamour clashes with gloom, where danger and death are an ever-present theme. Like no other, visionary set designer Ken Adam helped to shape the Bond series' distinctive visual language of power, paranoia, and opulence. He didn't just design sets, he weaponized negative space and constructed monuments to megalomania. The villains, each one more ferocious than the next, provided the motive, but Ken Adam provided them with a temple. The strokes on paper, violent, impatient, bleeding with a frantic energy. There is only the operatic scale of the triangle and the circle, the crushing geometry of the super layer, where a ceiling shouldn't just provide shelter, but weight. Adam understood that if you want to make a villain truly terrifying, you don't give him a weapon, but an environment that makes the hero feel like an insect. He built the stage for the end of the world, all with the touch and streak of his trusted Flowmaster pen, and the audacity to believe that a movie set could be more realistic than reality itself. In the world of Ken Adam, the architecture doesn't just house the evil, it breathes it. Who would have believed that this innocent-looking boy would one day be known to Bond fans across the globe? Born Klaus Hugo Adam on February 5th, 1921, the man we now know as Ken was the third of 4 children, born to Fritz and Lily Adam. The family enjoyed a prosperous upper-middle-class life in Berlin's Tiergarten district, living in a sprawling 10-room apartment. Here is where our story begins. Berlin. In the 3 decades following the founding of the German Empire in 1871, the old residence of officials and garrisons had transformed into Europe's most modern and fastest-growing metropolis. Chimneys rose across the capital as Berlin became Germany's prime industrial center. It was the home of titans like Borsig, Agfa, and the electrical giants Siemens and Halske, and AEG, enterprises that crowned Berlin the high-tech capital of the world. Year after year, the metropolis absorbed waves of migrants. Many of these newcomers were Jews from Prussian provinces or Eastern Europe. By 1905, the city had well over 2 million residents, and life in the city was a sensory assault. With hundreds of carriages, cabs and bicycles rattling and ringing, crossing the street became a masterpiece for the city dweller and a torment for the provincial. The young capital presents a polished, gleaming and orderly face to the world, employing 1,126 street sweepers to maintain its tidy appearance. Shop windows dazzle with luxury displays, and at Pariser Platz, ostentatious palaces dominate the landscape. The grand corporate headquarters of the Diskontogesellschaft, the Prussian Central Bodenkredit AG, and the International Sleeping Car Company. Finally, anchoring the Pariser Platz, stands the ultimate monument to opulence, the Hotel Adlon, which is still Berlin's finest address today. Behind pompous staircases and grand facades, the representatives of both old and new wealth had made their homes. Between 1900 and 1920, no other income group expanded as rapidly as that of the truly affluent. The wealth of the Adam family was built on the prestigious S. Adam Fashion House. Founded by Ken's grandfather, David Saul Adam, the business had risen from a small tailor shop to a renowned department store and royal court supplier. This background of old-world elegance and commercial success defined Ken's early years. In 1930, Klaus enrolled in the French Gymnasium, an elite school known for its cosmopolitan atmosphere and French language instruction. While his brothers were more practical, his father described Klaus as a dreamer who preferred painting and poetry. His artistic talent was already evident, though it was famously mocked by his great-uncle as a pile of spinach and eggs, after he had presented him one of his drawings, a majestic stag in Scotland. Within the bustling street scene on Friedrichstrasse, the family's business flourished. But a dark force was looming in the shadows and slowly ascending through the ranks of power. His name, Adolf Hitler. After he and his National Socialist Party had won the 1932 general election, he was sworn in as Chancellor of Germany and head of the coalition government on 30th of January 1933. Just a month later, one fateful night would change Germany forever, and ultimately the life story of Ken Adams' family. Late evening of February 27th, 1933. Flames engulfed the opulent Reichstag building, home of the German parliament in Berlin. By the time fire services arrived, the raging fire was already out of control. The National Socialists blamed the Communist Party and used the event to fuel claims that a communist uprising against the German Reich was imminent. It served as the pretext for issuing an emergency decree that allowed the Nazis to arrest political opponents without justification. What became known as the Reichstag Fire Decree was a pivotal tool that enabled the Nazis to dismantle the democratic Weimar Republic and transform it into a dictatorship, with a leader at its helm who had long regarded the Jews as the root of all evil. Correctly interpreting the developments as dangerous for the family, Ken's eldest brother Peter fled to Paris in the summer of 1933, desperately urging his remaining family to do the same. Yet his father, Fritz Adam, saw the shifting political landscape through quite a different lens. Shaped by his pride as a former soldier of World War I, where he was decorated with both the first and second-class Iron Cross. Following the liquidation of the family firm S. Adam in 1932, a casualty of the global economic depression, Fritz attempted a bold restart, despite the financial ruin. He pivoted the business toward athletic wear and equipment, trying to rebrand it as the Sport Adam GmbH. On March 20, 1933, acting as the sole proprietor, he opened his new store at the corner of Leipziger Straße and Mauerstraße. The timing, however, could not have been more tragic. Just a few days later, the Nazi regime called for the nationwide boycott of Jewish businesses. Hordes of violent paramilitary brownshirts roamed the streets. They vandalized Jewish property, assault people, and smear slogans across shop windows. By November 25, 1933, the pressure had become unbearable, and Sport Adam was forced to file for bankruptcy. Following a brief arrest of Fritz Adam by the feared Gestapo, the family finally fled to England in 1934. With the help of the Refugees Committee, the Adam family found a house in the London district of Hampstead, where Lily Adam opened a pension at 80 Greencroft Gardens. Soon known simply as Number 80, the house provided accommodation for many refugees and was run as a guest house until the early 1950s. The circumstances of losing his business and fleeing Germany left Fritz Adam a broken man. He tried his best to work as a sales representative, but could no longer contribute to the family's livelihood. On January 17, 1936, he passed away in London. Klaus, who had been admitted to the prestigious St. Paul's School in London, encountered a universe of emigrants in his mother's boarding house. The Hungarian artist Gábor Pogany took him to the studios of London Films, where he met Pogany's compatriots, the brothers Vincent, Alexander, and Zoltán Korda. Nobody then knew that all of them would be set on paths leading them into the international film business, with Klaus and Vincent even winning the prestigious Academy Awards. It was Vincent Korda, himself a renowned art director, who advised Klaus to study architecture, and in 1938 he enrolled as a part-time student at the Bartlett School of Architecture at University College in London. However, due to the ongoing Second World War, Klaus dropped out of his studies at the Bartlett School and applied to the Royal Air Force. Not accepted until 1941, he was the only German to be admitted, until his brother Dieter also entered military service. For security reasons, Klaus was renamed Keith Howard Adams, but his fellow servicemen cheekily gave him the nickname Heini because of his German origin. After an extensive flight training in Scotland, the US and Canada, Klaus was posted to 609 Squadron in Kent in 1943, where he piloted a Hawker Typhoon, the fastest British aircraft at the time. The war in the skies was a brutal one, and many brave pilots of 609 Squadron lost their lives over Belgium and France. Klaus was lucky. 2 years after the end of the war, 26-year-old Klaus, now a survivor and a hero of the Royal Air Force, found himself in a phase of reorientation in 1947. He had finally been granted British citizenship and decided that due to a lack of promotion prospects, further military service would not be for him. Instead, he moved within London's artistic bohemia, searching for a new direction for his life. Lying dormant in his mind was art and what one could do with it. In the autumn of 1947, his sister Loni, who was employed by the US Embassy in London, managed to find a placement for her film-loving brother at Riverside Studios in Hammersmith in West London, and he later also worked at Twickenham Studios. Due to his talent for drawing and his knowledge of architecture, he was assigned to the art department. The first films for which Klaus Adam visualized set details were The Brass Monkey in 1948 and The Queen of Spades in 1949. For the latter, a drawing of a church interior was signed by him as K.H. Adam. As Klaus proved to be quite the tongue twister for his fellow colleagues in the art department, he finally changed his name to Ken Adam sometime in 1950. 10 years later, Adam found his new dynamic felt-tip pen technique, specifically drawing with a US-made broad-tipped standard Flowmaster, a rare exception among production designers and a core characteristic of his style. It helped him break away from the meticulous, small-scale design methods he had been taught during his architecture studies. Using the Flowmaster, he could rapidly transfer his visual ideas to paper, achieving an expressive style and atmospheric chiaroscuro effects. The intensity of his drawings makes it clear how Adam's hand follows his inner eye. Furthermore, the relatively coarse felt-tip pen prevented him from getting lost in unnecessary details, which is reflected in his minimalist, mostly large-scale designs. And nowhere did he make better use of his new style than in the James Bond series, that launched with a pre-production of Dr. No in 1961. Exciting times were ahead, not just for 007, but equally for Ken, who drew himself into the collective minds of fans across the globe by creating truly larger-than-life set designs. Production design is a silent power, and most effective when it remains invisible to the audience. While the production designer is the architect of a film's visual essence and overall look, their contribution is often overlooked, despite being one of the most vital roles in production. They are typically the first to start, beginning their work long before the director or the cinematographer. By reading the script, they conceptualize the entire environment where the story lives before ever breaking ground on construction. But the true craft of the production designer lies in building worlds that feel utterly authentic, whether they are grounded in realism or born of pure fantasy. When done right, the audience accepts this constructed environment as reality, even though feature films are inherently artificial. What we see on screen is a carefully curated blend of fact and fiction, brought to life by a production designer who leads the art department to manifest the director's vision, while navigating the constraints of time, logistics, and budget. Working closely with the director, the production designer maps out exactly how the story's world will look on screen. But it's not all just dreaming up visuals. They also have to be the pragmatist for the producer, providing the budgets and timelines needed to get the job done, without breaking the bank or missing a deadline. Under the production designer, the art director takes the lead on the technical side, turning concept art and rough sketches into detailed architectural plans, with a team of assistants and draftsmen. Their reach extends even further, overseeing everything from location scouts, finding the right backdrops, to the construction crews and prop masters who make sure every detail is ready for action. It's a simple equation. The bigger the film, the more massive the undertaking. For Adam, both the scale of the Bond films and the sheer mountain of work behind them would turn out to be monumental. No scene set the standards for Bond's cinematic world like the introduction of the spy in a lavish casino setting. Can Adams' drawing, originally called the Ambassadors Club, doesn't just show a room, it pulls you into a world that feels instantly alive. The space rises around you with confidence. A sweeping staircase, tall windows draped in heavy fabric, and columns that seem almost ceremonial. Everything is slightly larger than life, and yet nothing feels out of place. Adam understood how to make a set feel expensive without actually being expensive. And here you can sense that ambition in every line of the sketch. The room tells you that this is a world of elegance, danger, and exclusivity. What makes the design so compelling is the way Adam balances that grandeur with a surprising sense of intimacy. More importantly, this is architecture that introduces the main character, even before he arrives, shaping the audience expectations of who he is. A man who belongs in a room like this must be controlled, elegant, and just a little dangerous. The set becomes an extension of his personality. This isn't just any gambling hall, it's a stage for a very specific kind of drama. When Bond steps into a room that looks like this, the moment feels ceremonial, and Adam's environment frames him as iconic before he even speaks. In this single drawing, you can already see the birth of the Bond aesthetic. Adam took a modest budget and transformed it into a world that feels mythic. He invited the audience into a fantasy of sophistication and danger that would shape the entire franchise. But it is the architecture of villain lairs where Adam truly excels. Looking at the famous tarantula room of Dr. No's island base on Crab Key, it becomes obvious why. It is a masterclass in German expressionism with a touch of Cold War futurism. Can Adam use this space to transform an interrogation room into a psychological experience of vulnerability? His sketch emphasizes a forced perspective. The heavy Flowmaster strokes create a ceiling that feels like it's physically pressing down on Professor Dent as he retrieves the venomous spider for the attempt on Bond's life. The massive circular skylight, with its heavy grid, is the room's dominant feature and a recurring signature shape in Adam's designs. It functions as a giant eye, suggesting that whoever is in this room is under constant observation. The shadows cast by the skylight act as virtual bars. Even though the room is large and relatively empty, the character is literally draped in the pattern of a cage. It signals to the audience that there is no escape. The The vast amount of negative space adds a sense of isolation. Placing Professor Dent in this room makes him look small and exposed. Crucial for the tarantula sequence, as it establishes that there are no corners to hide in and no objects to use for protection. And Dent's reaction in the film proves the point. He looks around in fear and clearly doesn't know what to make of this bizarre room that looks more like a stage. It heightens the audience's unease and foreshadows what is to come next. The guest room where Bond and Heini stay at Crab Key is a fascinating contrast. It might look like a mid-century modern hotel suite, and yet the coziness is actually a calculated psychological tactic. In the world of 007, the villain often treats the hero with exaggerated hospitality before the inevitable confrontation. By providing a plush bed, soft lighting, and elegant furniture, Dr. No asserts his superiority. He isn't just a random thug, he is a man of culture and immense wealth. The coziness is a power move, meant to make Bond and Heini feel like guests who owe their host gratitude. The more comfortable the room, the more jarring the realization of captivity becomes. Adam uses this normality to create a sense of uncanny dread. Everything looks right, but the context, being on a private island owned by a madman, is all wrong. Adam leans heavily into the international style and mid-century modernism in this sketch. Both the bed and seating are very low to the ground. In set design, low horizontal lines create a sense of calm and stability. It's meant to lower the characters and the audience's guard. Unlike the jagged, expressionist shadows of the tarantula room, the lines here are straight, clean, and rational. This reflects Dr. No's obsession with order and efficiency. In the sketch, the views are often implied to be artificial or heavily screened. This reinforces the idea that Crab Key is an autonomous world in which the characters are hidden away from reality. This room serves a very specific narrative purpose in Dr. No. It sets the stage for the dinner scene, in which Bond and Heini will face their host for the first time. Once the characters step into Dr. No's living room, opulence is mixed with modern technology and raw nature. The centerpiece of the room is the massive underwater aquarium. Adam's sketch shows a broad cinematic window sitting in a wall of raw, jagged rock, while the film still reveals the clever trickery used to unnerve the audience when Dr. No famously explains that the glass is convex, making the fish appear much larger than they are. This is a brilliant metaphor for the villain himself, a man who uses technology and isolation to project an image of power far greater than his physical reality. As Dr. No was made on a modest $1 million budget, Adam didn't have the funds for a real aquarium, so he used rear projection of stock footage. Because the fish looked too big, the magnifying effect line found its way into the script to cover the flaw, turning a budget constraint into a legendary character trait. Dr. No's living room is carved directly into the island's rock. By placing high Rococo furniture and expensive art, including the famous stolen Goya painting, in a cave, Adam highlights Dr. No's conqueror mindset. He has tamed the primitive Earth with his refined and stolen taste. The use of different floor levels is also a key psychological tool in this scene. The living area is lower than the dining area. This creates a conversation pit that feels intimate but also trap-like. The seemingly soulless tree in Adam's sketch serves as a symbol of death, intended to remind the agent of the danger of his mission. While only seen briefly in Dr. No, it interestingly reappears in Mr. Osato's office in You Only Live Twice in 1967, also in a room where Bond experiences dangerous encounters. The reactor room is the beating heart of Dr. No's operation on Crab Key and the climax of the film. It can be regarded as the birthplace of the techno layer, a design language that would define the Bond franchise and countless action films to follow. The room is dominated by aggressive diagonal lines. Massive angle support beams on the right create a sense of dynamic energy and industrial weight. In his sketches, Adam uses these to draw the eye toward the center of the room, creating a vanishing point that suggests the base is much larger than the studio set actually was. While the guest room was relatively neutral and the living area stony, the reactor room introduces a harsh functional color scheme. In the color sketch and the film still, the ceiling is a bold, oppressive red, the universal color for danger, radiation, and emergency. The inclusion of a large globe reminds the audience of the scale of Dr. No's plan. He isn't just a criminal, he is a threat to the entire world. Even in this high-tech setting, Adam's roots in Expressionism are visible. The room is massive, making the human workers look like tiny, replaceable cogs in a machine, reflecting the villain's worldview in which individuals are irrelevant compared to the power of the technology he controls. Moving from the jagged, expressionistic caves of Dr. No to the third film, Goldfinger, in 1964, can Adam's designs turn into what could be labeled Bondian architecture? While Dr. No was about the isolation of a secret island, Goldfinger brings that same menacing design philosophy into the heart of modern civilization. It is hard to pick a favorite set design of Goldfinger, but the laser room in his Swiss factory is certainly high up on the list. Adam uses a very specific architectural language here to heighten the tension of Bond's famous near-death experience that has long been a standout scene of the entire franchise. The sketches prominently feature a massive metal frame that holds the laser, an aggressive structure. By making the weapon part of the room's architecture, Adam makes the threat feel inescapable. The room, with its low and wide proportions, is designed with a strong horizontal emphasis. This draws the audience's eye across the execution table, making the slow movement of the laser across that horizontal plane feel agonizingly long. In these sketches, Adam strips away all unnecessary detail. The vast emptiness of the floor and walls isolates the two main objects, the table and the laser. This focuses the audience's entire psychological attention on the point of contact between the beam and the metal. On the left, we find a raised glass-walled observation booth, creating a theatrical relationship. Goldfinger watches from above like a god, while Bond is laid out like a specimen on a slide below. No paintings or antiques like in Dr. No's lair. This is the backstage of Goldfinger's operation, where he doesn't need to impress anyone. He only needs to destroy. At the time of filming, high-powered lasers were still largely experimental. Adam's design made the technology feel grounded and terrifyingly real by placing it in a believable industrial setting. Moving the plot to the United States, The Rumpus Room at Goldfinger's Kentucky stud farm is a triumph of Ken Adams' gadget architecture. It represents the intersection of mid-century American luxury and ruthless industrial efficiency. While Dr. No's lair was a hidden cave, the Rumpus Room is a suburban Kentucky fortress hiding in plain sight. The most striking feature is the aggressive slanting ceiling. It drives the eye downward toward the center of the room, creating a sense of dynamic energy, suggesting that the room itself is active rather than static. The ceiling girders are exposed and massive. This deconstructs the idea of a cozy ranch house and reminds the audience that this is a sophisticated piece of engineering. It feels more like a hangar or a factory than a living room. The room is of course famous for its mechanical transformations, which Adam carefully planned in these drawings. Central to the sketches is the pool table. It acts as the focal point of the room's normal facade, and when it flips to reveal a computer console, the architecture itself becomes a co-conspirator in Goldfinger's crime. The room is designed not for living, but for performance and observation, designed to command attention and enforce hierarchy. Like in Dr. No, Adam utilizes different floor levels to create a natural stage for Goldfinger to address his mafia associates. While the large windows suggest a connection to the outside world, the interior is structured so that everyone inside is focused on the central briefing area. The repetitive lines of the ceiling and wall panels create a rhythmic, almost hypnotic visual environment. It suggests a world of total order and mathematical precision. Exactly the world Goldfinger wants to create by controlling the gold supply. The design of the Fort Knox interior is Ken Adams' most legendary achievement because it is a total fabrication. The real interior of the United States Gold Depository is a series of small, mundane rooms with low ceilings. Adam realized that for the climax of Goldfinger, he needed a cathedral of gold. Tracing the creative process through his sketches reveals how he moved from a functional storage space to a mythic golden fortress. This first sketch is a fascinating look at Adams' architectural DNA. Even in this early gestural stage, you can see him moving away from the reality of a bank vault and toward a monumental industrial cathedral. He uses a low-angle perspective, creating the illusion of a space that is larger than the human mind can compute. The heavy vertical lines cut through the horizontal bars. It's not just structural, it creates a visual cage or prison for the gold. Adam is moving from the vibe of the room to the actual engineering of the set. He starts to use white space more strategically. The bright, unshaded areas suggest polished steel, which would eventually allow him to use the gold bars as a light source by bouncing studio lights off them. In set design, symmetry often represents power, stability, and absolute control. All traits that reflect the US government's sense of security, as well as Goldfinger's obsession. The design of the vault transforms the gold from a treasure into a prisoner. It reinforces the idea that in Goldfinger's world, wealth is something to be captured and controlled with industrial force. There is no hint of the outside world. No windows, no vents, no doors. Just steel and gold. It is the ultimate soulless environment, even more so than Dr. No's reactor. In this refined version of Ken Adams' vision for the Fort Knox set, the gold is filling the space, but the architecture is the steel. This creates a high-contrast environment. the warm, organic glow of gold versus the cold, black strength of steel. And by placing bars in front of the gold, Adam creates a visual barrier between the viewer and the wealth. You can see it, but you are separated from it. The height and scale of the Fort Knox inner sanctum are crucial because they transform a bank vault into a psychological landscape. Ken Adam understood that to make the audience believe in Goldfinger's megalomania, the set had to exceed the logic of human understanding. In traditional architecture, extreme height is used in cathedrals to make the individual feel small in the presence of the divine. In Adam's Fort Knox, the divine is the gold. The scale forces the audience to view the gold with a sense of awe and religious significance. The vast emptiness in the center of the room, surrounded by the massive industrial framing, creates a dramatic vacuum. All the tension of the ticking atomic bomb is concentrated in that central void, making the stage feel epic and terrifyingly lonely at the same time. If Adam had built a realistic, low-ceiling vault, the climax of the film would probably have felt like a common heist. The extreme scale elevates the film into the realm of mythology. A temporary shift in Ken Adams' design language from the industrial cathedral of Fort Knox to something much more sinister can be seen in his minimalist yet incredibly effective designs for the Spectre boardroom in Thunderball, a room that oozes corporate totalitarianism. This early sketch shows the blueprint for a space that is designed to exert absolute psychological control. Dominated by a long tapering perspective, everything here is designed to lead the eye directly to Blofeld's higher chair on the right. Every person in this room is physically oriented toward the head of Spectre, creating a vertical hierarchy. By placing the leader in a position of total visual command, Adam creates a space where no one can whisper or glance away without being noticed. Whoever sits in those chairs will always be watched at any time. The ceiling and walls are composed of repeating mathematical grids. In the psychology of space, such repetition can be somewhat unnerving, as it suggests an environment that is entirely controlled, as well as pre-calculated. In this second sketch, the table in the center is much more defined, and yet feels more like a runway. It acts like a literal path leading the eye to Spectre's number one. Every word that is spoken here, every information, and all lives at that table are funneled towards a leader, a flow towards one point of control. The translation from paper to screen works like a charm. By tapering the table so sharply, Adam makes the distance between the seated agents and the leader at the end feel vast. It creates a loneliness, even in a room full of people. The final sketch makes it obvious. The most striking feature is the extreme one-point perspective. Every line converges exactly onto the silhouette of number one, now seated in a private booth. The extremely low table, acting as a runway, is no longer a piece of furniture. It's a sharp wedge that physically divides the room. It acts as a runway for power, while simultaneously emphasizing that information flows one way and judgment the other. The agents are seated in a sunken central area. Once more, Adam uses different floor levels to distinguish between underlings and leaders. The agents cannot stand up without being on stage. The perfect symmetry suggests that any deviation would be immediately visible. It is a room specifically designed for total surveillance. By 1965, Ken Adam had designed 3 Bond films that undoubtedly set the standards for future decades. In between, he had skipped from Russia with Love to lend his unique talent to the legendary cult classic Dr. Strangelove. He was widely regarded as a visionary genius who had fundamentally changed the status of the production designer. He had won 2 Best Production Design BAFTAs back-to-back for Dr. Strangelove and The Ipcris File, further cementing his reputation as the prime architect of the Cold War cinematic aesthetic. Journalists and critics were beginning to recognize that the look of Bond was as much Adams as it was Ian Fleming's. There was a growing fascination with how his sets were able to fool people. The most famous example was the Fort Knox set. After Goldfinger was released to cinemas, distributor United Artists reportedly received letters from US citizens outraged that a British film crew had been allowed inside the most secret vault on US soil. Adams' work ensured that Bond could live in a world that felt more modern and more dangerous than the one the audience actually lived in. According to himself, Ken Adams' most memorable experience would be the production of You Only Live Twice in 1966. Director Louis Gilbert's idea to place the villain's headquarters inside of an extinct volcano was extremely appealing to Adam. When he delivered a rough sketch to Gilbert and producer Albert R. Broccoli, he didn't just draw a room, he designed an entire ecosystem of villainy. Broccoli famously asked if such a set was doable if he would provide Adam with $1 million. Back in 1966, an enormous amount of money. The result was not just one of Bond's most awe-inspiring sets, it would turn out to become one of the biggest sets ever built in the UK. With a height of almost 40 meters, the scale was truly immense. When journalists and industry peers were invited to Pinewood Studios, they were confronted with a set that was so structurally sound and visually overwhelming that many could not process that it was a hollow shell made of plaster, fiberglass, and 700 tons of steel. Once more, it is Adams' visual oculus motif that presents a fascinating contrast. Just like the skylight of the Tarantula Room in Doctor No, the volcano crater possesses a massive circular opening. But while the skylight acted like a lid on a jar, trapping people inside, the crater opening is a gateway, serving as a launch point for a space rocket. Instead of trapping a man with a spider, it traps the world with a nuclear threat. Blofeld's private quarters within the volcano aren't any less impressive, and a fine example of psychology in architecture. When shortly after the 1-hour mark, Karin Dorf's character Helga Brandt is executed in a pool of piranha fish, she falls down the narrow bridge, functioning as a trap door. Each person crossing this bridge walks a thin line. Architecturally, this creates an immediate sense of instability. Visitors are literally balanced over their own peril. In the sketch, the walls curve around the desk, almost creating a cocoon for the villain. The room slightly resembles the inside of a skull, and once again features Adams' signature oculus, present as a skylight. The long, low lines of the furniture and the bridge provide a clinical efficiency without any clutter. This minimalism is meant to be intimidating, suggesting a mind that has calculated every variable and left no room for error or mercy. Often copied or referenced until today, the volcano lair has rightfully earned its place among Adams' most significant set designs, but his creative involvement in the Bond franchise was far from over. For the return of Sean Connery in Diamonds Are Forever, the arch-enemy remained the same as in the previous 3 films. Set largely in the United States, most prominently Las Vegas, the film didn't call for an extraordinary villain lair, but ingenuity in extending what was already there. The International Hotel, opened in July 1969, served as the foundation for Ken Adams' White House design. By simply extending the east and north wing facade with another wing rising behind it, the White House visually represents the ivory tower of reclusive billionaire Willard White. High above the buzz of Las Vegas, the villain, who we later learn is Blofeld impersonating White, can survey his empire like a god. Adams' decision to add a fictional wing to the hotel was a classic example of his big lie philosophy. The tower was so seamlessly integrated into the shots of the real hotel that many tourists later arrived in Las Vegas looking for the White House Tower, only to be disappointed that it had been a cinematic illusion. The penthouse, again with several floor levels and slanted ceiling, is strikingly similar to Adams' earlier work for Dr. No and Goldfinger, but with a 1970s twist. Filled with polished marble, chrome and glass, this is soulless quality at its most sophisticated. Everything is hard, shiny and cold. The floor-to-ceiling windows provide a bird's-eye view of Las Vegas, which reinforces the panopticon theme, a metaphor for modern power and control. The man at the center is able to see everything, and yet remains unseen by the city below. For The Spy Who Loved Me, the 10th James Bond film produced by Eon Productions, and the 3rd starring Roger Moore, Ken Adam envisaged an even larger set than the volcano lair 10 years prior. The interior of the supertanker Liparus proved a challenge for both Adam and the producers, as there was no soundstage in the UK big enough to house such an immense set that also needed to include a tank to house 3 full-size nuclear submarines. Producer Cubby Broccoli, dead set on the continuing success of the James Bond franchise, decided to simply build a stage at Pinewood, while Adam oversaw the construction of the set at the same time. The famous 007 stage was born, forever cementing Pinewood Studios as Bond's home. With 59,000 square feet, it is the second largest soundstage in the world, after the Marlene Dietrich stage of Berlin's Babelsberg Film Studios. While Babelsberg has more floor area, the 007 stage was uniquely designed for monumental height and depth, while also being able to hold over 4 million liters of water. Being somewhat tired of his linear designs that he still used for this early sketch of the villain's underwater hideout Atlantis, Adam wanted to try a new direction by introducing more curves. The result was a superstructure that possesses its very own visual psychology. With the dome being placed between 4 legs, Adam created an image of a giant spider or crab walking on water, hinting at a living creature that has emerged from the depths, thus tapping into a primal fear of the unknown beneath the surface. In Atlantis, Carl Stromberg is emulating nature. He is a villain who isn't just hiding in the sea, he has become part of it. While taking the familiar geometry of a North Sea oil rig and deforming it into a villainous lair, Adam succeeded in making the massive structure feel light, and yet achieving a militaristic posture. By surrounding the curved dome of the living quarters with straight industrial supports, he highlights it as the brain of the machine. In the 1970s, offshore oil rigs had been well known. One was even featured in Diamonds Are Forever 6 years before, and people knew they had massive supports. Using that same visual language made the audience believe Atlantis could actually exist and function in heavy seas. Stromberg's living room provides yet another interesting twist on Adam's Oculus motif. While usually embedded in the ceiling, this room features several openings in the floor, through which a lower floor can be seen. We also find round aquarium windows in the walls. With this clever and unusual design, Adam suggests that Stromberg's power is rooted in what lies in the lower levels, and ultimately the sea, reinforcing his vision of himself as the master of the subaquatic world. A room that doesn't seem to match with the rest, however, is the dining room. A 16th century dining hall embedded in a futuristic shell might feel somewhat off, but it serves a purpose. Like any casino setting of earlier films, it represents opulent old-world luxury. But here, it doesn't show us the world in which the protagonist acts, like it did in Dr. No. The civilized luxury merely masks the fact that Stromberg is a dangerous extremist. The clever framing of the deep ocean in rectangular windows is an expression of the villain's ideology. Stromberg regards the sea, and ultimately the world, as a curated gallery of objects he owns. As impressive as Atlantis was, it was built as a scale model, and thus no comparison to the Liparis supertanker set on the newly built 007 stage. For filmmakers and cast alike, this was a gigantic playground for the world domination scheme of Carl Stromberg. For Ken Adam, it was the ultimate cathedral of evil, a three-dimensional battlefield on which the converging lines of the hull lead the eye deep into the bowels of the ship. Psychologically, it reinforces the tanker's role as a predator that has just swallowed the nuclear submarines. According to Adam, even cinematographer Claude Renoir was visibly nervous when confronted with this enormous set. Due to declining eyesight, he had difficulties seeing the far end of the set, and although nobody was supposed to know at the time of filming, Adam later revealed that he asked famed director Stanley Kubrick to light the set. In itself, an enormous undertaking, due to the vastness of the set and all its shiny surfaces. While experimenting with different directions in his designs, Adam's signature motifs remained. One in particular that is hard to overlook is the large globe in the Liparis control room, a visual reproduction of the one in Dr. No's reactor room. World domination had been the goal of many Bond villains, but in 1979, billionaire industrialist Hugo Drax set his sights on dominating outer space as well. In the wake of the Star Wars hype that had begun 2 years before, Ken Adams' final James Bond film would combine all his production design skills to create the larger-than-life world of Drax. A secret laboratory in Venice, headquarters hidden in the rainforest, with a command room reminiscent of Mondrian paintings, and a gigantic space station. Bond had arrived at the height of what many labelled exaggeration, even absurdity. Nevertheless, Ken Adam once again delivered artistic cathedrals of evil that design students would still study decades later. Heavily pushing into the realm of Baroque futurism, he made the statement that a Bond villain's ego had finally outgrown Earth itself. The gas exhaust chamber is yet another fascinating example of alternating the signature Oculus motif, this time as a firing chamber, with the architectural focal point being a literal kill zone. Being trapped under that Oculus, when the countdown reaches 0, enemies cease to exist. It's a contradiction. While Adam designed this room to look like a space-age temple, it functions as a prehistoric fire pit, to facilitate the most primitive act, burning one's enemies. In each of his 7 James Bond films, Adam had utilized the Oculus motif and achieved a different effect each time. Entrapment, surveillance, vulnerability, ambition, destruction, instability, execution. The sketches for the Pyramid Control Room showcase Adam's mastery of forced perspective and asymmetrical geometry to create a space that feels ancient and futuristic at the same time. The pyramid form is used to represent the peak of Drax's global power. The influence of Dutch painter Piet Mondrian is visible in the structural layout of the walls, which are composed of black intersecting beams that create a grid of varying rectangular sizes. This design choice mirrors the principles of De Stijl, a 1917 Dutch art movement, also known as neoplasticism, focused on creating a utopian, universal visual language by reducing art to its essential elements. The complex technology of a space launch facility is reduced to a series of abstract and flat geometric planes. The resulting grid suggests that global surveillance is a cold and mathematical process. The aggressive lines make the sharp pyramid feel disturbingly confining. Even when moving into space-age designs, Adam relied on his core principle of using straight lines and curves to define the cold, calculating ideology of a Bond villain. The layout of the Space Shuttle launch complex mimics the architecture of a great cathedral. The Moonraker shuttle is positioned at the far end of the set, exactly where an altar would be in a church. This makes the rocket the object of worship, a mechanical tool that promises a new world for Hugo Drax's chosen few. The soaring vertical lines draw the eye upward, mimicking the Gothic intent to reach toward the heavens. However, the vertical aspiration is soulless, as it leads not to salvation, but to the cold vacuum of space, where Drax plans to launch his global genocide. By designing the launch complex as a cathedral, Can Adam tells the audience that for Hugo Drax, technology is the only religion that matters in his quest. While designing the sets for Moonraker, Adam spent a great deal of time at NASA, where he spoke to scientists developing the Space Shuttle program. NASA's space station concepts at the time were largely based on connecting large cylinders, which Adam felt was not visually interesting enough for a Bond film. Instead, he created a more irregular, rotating mobile for the film's space station, while using NASA research to inform the functional detailing of the space shuttle sets. Because the entire structure, a 20-feet model built by Derek Meddings, rotated to create artificial gravity, every turn provided the audience with a different architectural aspect and composition, keeping it from feeling static. The striking resemblance of the central spherical hub to the iconic superlaser dish of the Star Wars Death Star is certainly not accidental. While Moonraker's narrative is often criticized for its campiness, Adam's contribution undoubtedly remains a great achievement in production design. It is his most cohesive work, as he manages to bridge the gap between a 16th century French chateau, Venetian laboratory, rainforest pyramid, and orbital space station using a singular visual language. The use of the aperture and the perfect sphere in the space station represented an ideology so detached from humanity that it had to leave the Earth entirely. Adam's final contribution was to prove that you could take the most soulless industrial materials, steel, glass, and fluorescent light, and arrange them in order to sell a big lie, so beautiful it became art. He didn't just build sets, he built worldviews. Sir Ken Adams' life was a masterclass in the ability to transform clinical geometry into a profound cinematic truth. From his early beginnings to becoming an Oscar-winning production designer and living his final years as a grand statesman of the arts, he remained a man who never lost his human touch. He hollowed out volcanoes and built cathedrals on Earth and in the heavens, not merely to showcase scale, but to reveal the psychological depths of the human condition. While his sets were designed to be epic and opulent in scale, Ken Adam himself was very humble. A visionary who taught us that if you dream with enough conviction, the impossible doesn't just become real, it becomes iconic.